All right, welcome to the Two Sons podcast. I hope all of you guys are having a great Wednesday. We're covering episode 3 of the Ahsoka series today. Most important thing that happened, I thought, obviously, was us getting our first spacewalking Jedi Armageddon style, doing giant crazy flips and then landing back on the ship, but then suddenly not working the second time and her drifting.
I know, and Sabine had to rescue her. That was pretty cool, though, seeing Ahsoka in like a custom built spacesuit was pretty sick.
There were a bunch of things that I really liked about that scene. Namely, I always am down for a Sith in a fighter craft.
Oh, for sure.
Like, angry flying. And
you know people are going to freak out for you calling Mork a Sith, though. Oh, no, you're talking Shin-Hati.
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
yeah,
both of them.
Dude,
but Mork is not a Sith, you're right. But for all we know, none of them are Sith.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
But yeah, we have had a lot of people clarify some things off of our first episode.
Yes, which thank you.
Mork is not a Sith, he's just like a mercenary.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. Or not a Padawan, or a youngling of the dark side.
Yes, there have been many things that have been clarified. And honestly, I feel like that's what you should do. I feel like if you had superpowers, like think about it. It's like The Boys on Amazon. If you have superpowers and all of a sudden you don't have any sort of like grand, religious conflict that you're participating in, like, why not throw it out there for some money?
Yeah,
you
gotta do something in the galaxy.
Don't forget Darth Cognus in the Darth Bane series was a mercenary assassin before she became a Sith. Like,
Let's be real. There's a lot of great mercenaries out there in Star Wars.
Yes,
for sure.
There are. I feel like that's the life. I feel like everybody falls into like works for the Republic, works for the Empire, or is a mercenary.
Right, or smuggler. Don't forget the smugglers.
Or moisture farmers.
Yeah, moisture farming, Tatooine, very important. They're doing God's work.
So this episode follows a pretty simple path. We have basically Ahsoka training Sabine, which we got to get into, just basically talking about, that's another thing that got clarified for us. Like, you and I were debating whether or not Sabine really had much force sensitivity, and I kind of considered her just like in that bottom tier, and it's like, no, she actually has like barely any force sensitivity.
She's essentially alive, and then Ahsoka's like, you're alive, so you have some level of force sensitivity.
Yeah, but like she does seem to clarify to Hu Yang that she's not trying to make her into a Jedi.
True.
She's just trying to make her into the best version of herself.
That's
which
true.
Makes some sense.
Which is actually a really cool take on Star Wars. It's like, okay, like let's say Ahsoka Tano came and sat next to us today, and she's like, "Hey boys, like how can we make you the best version of yourselves?" Yeah, that's cool. It's a nice concept.
It makes more sense to me too than her being like all gung ho about the Jedi when she literally left the damn order.
Well, and so this might be controversial a little bit. You know when Princess Leia all of a sudden just like force pulls herself into that starship that exploded.
Yeah.
And
why didn't Ahsoka have that power?
No, I know, but like, and all of a sudden like Leia just has all these great force abilities, and like looking back and seeing some of the movies, we understand that Leia actually was somewhat training to some level,
at least after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. But it would have been super annoying if Sabine all of a sudden was just able to move that cup. You know what I mean? Like, it would have gotten a huge eye roll from me if all of a sudden she was moving stuff with her hands across the table.
They're definitely building towards her, like, regaining that ability. I it's hard to say, too, because she says, like, it's been a while. So, like, I wonder if at some point in the past she had some of that capability. But, like, it is kind of funny seeing the dynamics in the ship, because it's like Hu Yang is just like just very much a Jedi. But he's a Jedi, he's very dogmatic, and he's like, Sabine's not cut out for it.
Yeah.
And then you have Sabine, who's like this half Mandalorian, like unenthusiastic, force user, and then you have Ahsoka, who's like this super powerful person who's not a Jedi.
Right.
And so like the three of them kind of make this like interesting group. They not
a Jedi by title.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they discover from Corellia that they need to go to the Denab system to find out what's going on. We end up with this really dope chase scene with these like crazy World War II fighter planes.
You picked that up too?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, who did anybody not pick up the World War II fighter plane?
And then it was so cool because they're like almost like verbatim same as World War II.
Or the buzzing noise and like the big grill on the front.
Yeah, exactly. And like the position of the wings were super
little stubby, little things.
But then it was funny because they're like, oh, these are two World War II-esque. So then they just flipped the tail end upside down and put it on the bottom of the ship. Yeah. No, those are dope. Those are super cool.
It reminded me of like a pod racer mixed with a...
Because they're a little janky looking, but like obviously, pretty fast. Yeah.
I was a fan though. I just like it's kind of a consistent theme throughout the Star Wars universe that like the Jedi and Sith love to be pilots.
Yeah.
I think that they get into this a lot in the books,
Mm-hmm.
in all the High Republic books that we've read. This idea that like they're actually some of the best pilots in the galaxy because they have Force sensitivity, right?
Right.
And that whole dynamic was cool. I've been really happy with the direction that they're going with the flight, like the space battle dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that is like
yeah.
I kind of hit on this in the first episode, but the idea of like the Republic captain of that capital ship, which by the way we saw a bunch more of those capital ships in that flotilla.
Yeah,
so
that was super cool.
Clearly that's what they're using to like make up the rest of the fleet. But in that scene, he's like he's communicating like THRAWN does in the THRAWN books, very naval, very naval command dynamics. And so he's like talking to the sensor officer, he's talking about using the tractor beam and all these different things, right? Or giving command to the bridge up. And so I was interested to see if they would continue to do stuff like that. And we literally had Sabine mention like making a turn to port side, I believe. She said that at one point. She said dive. She's talking about talking to the sensor officer, talking about the shields. We got to literally see the dynamic of the laser fire
between Ahsoka and Sabine, and even at a small level, you see that. What's the word? It's very formal, almost. Yeah,
it's very like it's kind of like you see in like the secret agent shows when there's like some sort of like group that's getting ready to raid a facility. There's always like they're using the hand signals and doing all this stuff. Like that's kind of what it reminds me of in the Star Wars context. But like literally, you see that too because the magistrate opens up turbo laser fire and communicates with one of her aides, the droid to start turbo laser fire. And the turbo laser fire works the shields down to 10%. They get closer to get a scan, but then the shields fail and they get hit. And so what makes me really excited about that specifically is like we talked about, one of the coolest parts of the THRAWN books is that naval combat dynamic, and it's very like battleship like strategic chess match thing going on. And I really think Filoni's building towards trying to use that a bunch with THRAWN, which I think is the ideal use of him. They did it a lot. If you guys remember in Rebels, like he had his flotilla set up a certain way and it was going to work if that one captain didn't.
That's true.
Veer
the
off
big
and
hangar
do his own
ship.
thing.
I forget what it was called, but yeah, they had that huge hangar ship and they ended up stealing it because the captain wasn't listening to THRAWN, and it was like slight position changes, right?
Yep, and it allowed someone to escape, which allowed them to get help. But THRAWN, of course, has contingencies on top of contingencies, so he's got like another squadron of TIE fighters. That was in the one where the X-wings and stuff like get past the blockade, but then they go into the clouds and they get shot to pieces, and that's when Hera gets captured. Remember? So like that's a huge part of the THRAWN experience is like basically this idea of like high-level naval combat, and I really think Filoni's building towards that, and I think that's super dope.
For sure. No, and I would love to see that chess match like play out with THRAWN at the helm. Like for anybody who has not read any of the THRAWN books, like it's hard for you guys to truly understand what we're talking about, but like THRAWN is an absolute artist when it comes to space battles.
I thought Hera was going to get into it for a second with the New Republic people, and then she didn't. Remember when she was like, he's not your average Imperial commander, and then she just stopped.
No, I know. But so let's talk about that. So we meet, what is the name? Senator Ziano, I believe, spelled with an X. And he's clearly just a giant
douchebag.
Yeah, he's doing his thing at high levels of douchery. But you wonder if that's just him saying like, "Oh no, like we already won." You know, there's no other threats in the galaxy, or if he's truly an Imperial sympathizer. And for some reason, I'm leaning towards the latter. I do think that he's an Imperial sympathizer. He seems really sketchy. And when Elena and I were watching the show this morning, she had him pinned like right from the beginning. She's like, that dude's sketchy. He's not a good dude. And I bet he's going to come up again.
There are two different ways that they could go with this. They could go these are Imperial plants direction, which is very much possibility and probably the most likely possibility.
Yeah, I think pretty probable.
The second direction they could go with it is like it could also be an example of why THRAWN believes that he needs to be in control. And so I'm actually going to get to one of my side topics for a second here because I think this is kind of relevant here. So I saw this on Instagram this morning, actually, which is so random. But it's an interview with Filoni, and I have no idea how long ago it was. but I would reckon that it's probably relatively recently.
Okay.
And I think it was a very, very passive aggressive way for Filoni to kind of address our Thrawn concerns.
Oh.
So in this clip, he's talking about canon in books.
Okay.
And basically,
I'm a little worried.
Like
all of a sudden.
Filoni straight up comes out and says, like, the way George Lucas sees it is that the only things that are canon are the movies and the TV shows. End of story.
Whoa.
And he basically goes like, he's like,
Dang.
when Disney announced that all of the other books were legends, he's like, they were already legends to me because the way George Lucas put it is those are not canon. The only things that are canon are the movies and the books. And
That's
so
wild to me. That's kind of a bummer.
He also explicitly like made a vague reference to Star Wars fans and their expectations in that part. So
Which is fair on his part because it would absolutely be miserable to make Star Wars content because of our expectations. Like I totally understand that. Dude, to me that feels like all of a sudden instead of just having canon and legends, it's canon A-level, or I'm sorry, legends, A-level canon, B-level canon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, exactly.
That's a little bit of a bummer.
It is a little bit of bummer.
Because that's one of the greatest things about Star
What the hell does that mean
Wars.
for the High Republic?
Yeah, I know, you're exactly right. And that's one of the greatest things about Star Wars is that massive, massive storyline that for the most part has no holes in it. I know, okay, go ahead, get out your fingers and start typing all the holes in our comments. Like, I get it. Like, it's not perfect. But for the most part, it's pretty cool when someone who doesn't know a lot about Star Wars can ask you, like, hey, Luke, why does this make sense? And you can say, oh, this makes sense for this, this, and this reason because this person existed and then died and then helped this person, right? Like, it's a huge storyline that works. And so it's kind of a bummer that all of a sudden you have two Thrawns existing out there.
I do wonder if they'll make a loose tie. So that's why I brought it up is like from the standpoint of what if it isn't Senator Ziono being an Imperial sympathizer, but rather just the classic, because George Lucas has done a really good job of building this out. Like, it's one of my favorite things about George Lucas is just the sheer amount of detail that he put into like conceptualizing this universe. But there is like the whole overall theme is light versus dark and balance, right?
Correct.
And like both sides are overly dogmatic. And balance is essentially what the goal is, where there's like this happy medium in there somewhere where we'll never actually get to it, but we're constantly like fighting back and forth over it, right? And so with that said, like we think of the evil empire as this evil entity, but like it's almost like a naive New Republic. Naive in the sense that like they're like, oh, all of these resources should be dedicated towards helping people. And it's like, actually, if you don't demonstrate strong military might to a certain extent, there's a lawlessness that occurs.
Correct.
And so that's kind of where I think they're going. Like, that could be a way for them to have a loose tie in the sense that, like, Thrawn is still this evil antagonist, but he has a loose tie to his version of himself that's in the books via this pathway, which is the New Republic is like literally incapable of keeping anybody safe.
They really are.
You know?
And also, you know, to further not backtrack, but to further, you know, support Dave Filoni, because you and I really like what Dave Filoni has done, and I truly say this, like I do trust Dave Filoni's vision. Like he essentially is Star Wars, and in absence of George Lucas, Dave Filoni is Star Wars.
He's taken over the Lucas mantle, probably,
exactly,
in terms of like the carrier of the story.
Right, exactly, and he's got some great help, right? So like Jon Favreau's amazing, right? So, but anyways, at some point, we also have to be down for the idea of Thrawn isn't some young officer anymore. That is
idealistic.
Yeah, that is super idealistic. Like, that man has seen atrocious things occur throughout the galaxy, and he's been a part of that, and he's had to make disgusting decisions that I know that he had problems with, right? And
his own people basically exiled him.
Exactly. And not only that, but as almost perfect as he is, he has not been perfect, right? He has regrets about some of the way that he's led, right? And there is some believable sense that we can take where it's like, Thrawn's probably not as young and as joyful as he once was. Like, that man is probably a little bit broken down, a little at this jaded, point, and a little bit jaded, and probably a little bit cutthroat, and probably has, you know, goals that he thinks that need to exist, and he's probably way more willing to exceed at those goals at any cost.
I was listening to the Ascendancy trilogy the other day, the sixth book, and in it, Keylori at one point, Keylori of Yuan, who's like the navigator, right?
Yeah.
That Thrawn's always just using as a pawn, and he basically is talking about how the Chiss don't have friends. And then Thrawn makes some comment about how that one of his navigator buddies is probably going to die in an upcoming battle, and he goes like, "I wonder why the Chiss don't have any friends."
Yeah.
Is what Keylori says. And so Thrawn literally goes like, "Let me make something clear." He's like the sole reason for my existence is to protect the Chiss ascendancy, and I will do absolutely whatever is necessary to do it. He leans into it hard. And that was in the sixth book. So this is further along. You have to think at the time that Timothy Zahn was writing this, the Filoni and them were already conceptualizing some of these shows, I would imagine. And so I push back on Filoni's idea a little bit in the sense that I would accept a loose interpretation of books as canon, but what's the purpose of any of this if you're just writing it all off? I push back on that idea a little bit. I think he was preemptively striking at the Thrawn pushback from Ahsoka. I really think he was.
Oh, really? Yeah, he might be. Well, dude, and think of it from his shoes too. Can you imagine? So we were just talking about the fact that essentially Filoni is Star Wars at this point, right? So could you imagine how difficult it would be to have that vision and that importance, and then all of a sudden have 50 other writers creating content for Star Wars universe, and how difficult it would be not only to keep them in line, but also to keep the timeline in check and to make sure everything works out. So it's that is probably exhausting. I cannot imagine how difficult that would be for him. And he's having to do it. So we're all excited because we're getting all these shows, we're getting all these books, we're getting all these video games. It's super cool. And we're all for it. But it's there is a little bit of a price to be paid, which is many, many minds creating what was a single brain creating Star Wars, George Lucas, but now it's completely split up across many people. And it would be hard as Dave Filoni to keep that all in check.
Exactly. Imagine you're running a company with 150 people, and it's split into 5 markets of 30 people each, and you have 5 different high level managers, and then you have 15 other lower level managers. It's the actual CEO can have a certain directive that he sends down, but each of the 5 managers are going to have a slightly different interpretation of that directive.
Right.
Then as you go down, each of the 15 managers are going to, and so that's why it's always so impressive when you go to places like Chick-fil-A, and it's you get this consistently great experience everywhere you go, and you're holy shit, these people are so good at what they do in terms of running a business, That's the thing. But the point is to your point, that's what's happening is I would imagine there's a loose framework that Filoni produces, and he might micromanage specific projects like Ahsoka, but when it comes to the High Republic and other fringe projects, he probably does leave a certain amount of creative freedom, and so it is difficult to attach all those things together. And I don't envy. We're not over here acting like it's easy.
No, it's
but
the opposite.
But there is it's a pretty low bar. For instance, I think it's a pretty low bar to be hey, there's all these mentions of gravity wells and jumping to hyperspace when there's objects in front of you, and being out of not being able to jump when you're in a planet, and all these different things. And Star Wars is just shit all over that in the Kathleen Kennedy era.
Right.
It's I don't think that's something that's too difficult to manage. And
totally.
So it is.
Yeah,
it is
we don't
tough.
want Marvel movies for Star Wars.
No.
We've talked about that 100 times now. I won't even go into it again. We just don't want that, and Dave Filoni gets that.
But I do think that when it comes to the Senators, that's kind of one of the 2 directions they could go. It's either a demonstration of how weak the New Republic is as a product of their idealism and their naivete, and then the flip side of that is just the good old fashioned we're plants working for the Empire,
which is kind of a cool concept and one that I'm always down for.
Oh yeah.
Seeing those sympathizers try and take out Ahsoka and Sabine at the shipyard was awesome. I thought that was so sick.
And don't forget too, they've clearly demonstrated in Mandalorian too that there are just really high level Imperial spies working at every level of the government,
of course.
basically.
Of course.
I did think it was interesting that they made a very explicit mention in the scene with the New Republic officials where they basically go the Imperial fleet is scattered and unorganized. They didn't say it doesn't exist or that it's small. They said it's scattered and unorganized. So like clearly that Shadow Council is trying to give the impression that they're spread out and unorganized, but really they're actually significantly powerful and prepared to make a strike, and they just need their leader essentially.
THRAWN, the great unifier.
Exactly. I thought that was a pretty strong indicator that THRAWN's coming back to put all that together.
And again, to your point that you've made in the past, it's just like if THRAWN thinks that the New Republic is weak, he'll use the remnant of the Empire in order to squash it and create power, right? Let's talk Purgles.
Yeah, man.
Dude, so I'm a big Purgle fan. Everyone knows that by now. It's really cool to see Purgles in live action. They really leaned into the humpback whale.
Oh, yeah, they did. I thought that was awesome.
It was super cool. It was super cool.
They even have the filters in their mouths and stuff.
Yeah, that was pretty dope. So, I do think we're going to see the travel to that new galaxy that we're learning about? Do you think we're going to see that next episode?
So, okay, I would imagine that what's probably
With the Eye of Sion ship?
What's probably going to happen is I would imagine that Ahsoka and Sabine are going to find some way to, or maybe even just Ahsoka, but like stow away on the ship essentially.
I see.
And if they stow away on the ship, then they will basically meet in this weird void space that they end up in, and there is where they'll have that confrontation. And then I think we're going to get an entire half of a season that is based around THRAWN. I
hope THRAWN's in a lot of this. Yeah, that'd be dope.
I think that's the direction they're going. Like I have a feeling because they're not. Have you noticed they're not really building out the Baylan character very much?
I know all this. I almost forgot about him. Right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he shows up at the end of the episode. Which, by the way, side note, I am so excited for next episode because that manhunt that's about to ensue with Sabine and Ahsoka hiding out in that red forest. It's gonna be so cool.
It's gonna be great.
That red forest is incredible.
It's dope. It's classic Star Wars.
Oh, it's just like they did it again where they made a dope ass planet that we want to explore. It's so cool.
And notice it's not like anything exceptionally over the top, loud. It's just it's an ocean and a beach and a rocky beach and a red forest.
It's so cool.
And it's kind of gloomy and
there's some remnants of Dathomirian, the red, the deep red. Velvet red is very Dathomirian-esque.
It clearly explains too that the Purgle it's not there was a secret key to how to find THRAWN. It was a key to find this Purgle hyperspace lane. That's what it was. Yeah.
And so with the whole entire Baylan Skull point that you made, there's one part of it where it's just did they forget to develop him? I think that's probably less likely. I think what it's doing is, how they only brush off Darth Vader when something big is happening. Yeah. They're like, hey, this is good enough for Darth, and then they send Darth in. I think that's kind of what is going on. I think it's a way for them to make Baylan this really powerful looking character that's off in the distance, and almost everything is below him, And I think as the stakes get higher, he'll be more and more involved. I'd like to think that he's going to be a little bit more involved next episode.
That's interesting. I think I disagree with you. I think that whenever you build to a climactic battle, it's kind of like we were just talking about with Jedi Survivor. It's when you get to the climactic battle against Dagan Gera, it doesn't feel like the end of the game. I remember when I beat Dagan Gera in the game, I was like, this can't be the end. This is there just wasn't. It just didn't carry enough weight. There wasn't enough, development of Dagan as a character, and that's kind of the way I feel about Baylan. Is I have a feeling he's going to die in the next 1 or 2 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think he's.
That'd be so Game of Thrones-esque if he died. That would be really sick. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, because it just again, I come back to the genesis of what this show really is, which is basically the setup for THRAWN's return to the galaxy and this big galactic conflict, which is leading to the Heir to the Empire movie. Essentially, that's kind of the way I'm trying to view it. And I don't think Baylan's going to be the focal point. I think he's an ancillary character in all of this. And so
that's a really interesting take.
Now I could be wrong, but think of it this way: we are at episode 3. There are 8 episodes. We are already at
Eye of Sion.
The Eye of Sion in this. What's the name of the system again?
I forget.
Denab. So they're at Denab. They're at the Eye of Sion. Like literally everyone who is important to this
Is all of a
situation
sudden
is
there.
already there.
Yeah.
Like what is like they're not going to go Mandalorian and then like all split off and then Ahsoka and Sabine are going to take down a crime syndicate like for an episode like they did with the Mandalorian. Like that's not what's going to happen here. Like they're not messing around with the filler.
Stuff happening.
They're getting to the point. So like I think in episodes 4 or 5 we're going to see the climactic conflict between Baylan and Ahsoka, and I think then essentially the tail end of the series is going to shift gears towards Ezra and Thrawn. And I just my thing is like I'm trying really hard, and I'm actually like keeping an open mind. Like I have a feeling that Filoni's going to land this plane. I just have a feeling.
Successfully?
I just think it's going to work.
No, I mean, like I joked around last episode, in Filoni we trust, right? Like
pretty much.
Like he's done a fabulous job thus far, and I think he'll continue to do a fabulous job. Yeah, and to his point, it's like we honestly do need to check our expectations a little bit.
Of course.
One thing that was interesting is we already saw little Jason. So that happened
future
faster.
Jedi Jason. Like 10-year-old me, basically.
Yes.
I'm going to be a Jedi.
I know, with green hair, which is what we see in Rebels, So that happened earlier than I thought. Hera was very safe this last episode. Like she was very much so in like the general chair. And I'm curious to see when she starts to get into the thick of it a little bit
when
more.
Thrawn comes back after his
you're
Uber
probably
ride.
right. You're probably
his Uber
right.
arrives in 7 minutes.
I know.
I know. Be on the lookout for a gray Toyota Camry.
But the Eye of Sion, which is a massive hyperspace ring. And then, everyone noticed this, but the idea of like a hyperspace ring is cool. Something that we've seen in the prequels with Anakin and Obi-Wan with their Starcraft, the idea of like hooking into like a hyperspace ring and all of a sudden having great abilities in your starship is actually pretty sick.
That's going to be the interesting thing too. Is the Eye of Zion essentially going to operate like as a standalone craft, or is it going to be like it is in the prequel trilogy where like a ship docks inside of it and then goes?
I think it's a standalone craft.
You think so?
I think what we see is
a Star Destroyer parking in the middle would be dope.
That would be really sick if it had that capability to like accept a Star Destroyer. That would be pretty dope. I'm not gonna lie, but I think we see like the main bridge at the top of it, the apex of it, and
it's got turbo lasers.
Exactly, and it's got like a full blown bridge, and Lady Elsbeth was already commanding it. So I think it's a not dock type of ship.
Did you notice the little conflict back and forth between Shinhati and Lady Elspeth talking shit about who ends up killing? Good news, Lady Elspeth, you almost got him.
I know. Dude, and again, like they did it again, which is really cool, where they had a broken down starship and then like space debris like next to it floating with it. Like that is so cool.
That whole sequence actually was another callback to Thrawn, I thought, because like it disappears off the scope when the power shuts down, and literally it disappeared off the scope because Hu Yang himself got shot basically into a submissive state. Like one of the things that you learn from the Thrawn books is like Thrawn will typically like enter a system from a great distance, very similar to what happened at standard Jedi protocol, right? And then he puts on passive sensors, so like he basically allows the ship to be cloaked except from visual, but like you can't see it from that far away.
Of course.
So then he can like kind of scope
a speck of dust on the wall,
And then he basically scopes out the situation, and then Thrawn will always like take like an in-system jump to get closer, and then he'll like execute his plan. And like, but one of the things, and you see this a lot in the first Thrawn trilogy of books with the conflicts between the Empire and the Grisks. There's this idea of like of shutting your power off to become essentially invisible to sensors. And so we see that when they land on the planet and they shut everything down until they do their flyover. And then when they leave, she's like, can we risk it? And they turn everything back on. So like, I don't think it's coincidental. I think it's intentional that they've gone to this much detail to kind of set up kind of like a theme of the show surrounding like naval battle tactics, which I think is really, really exciting.
Yeah, it's probably a great lead into. Yeah, I totally agree with you. One little shout out before we end here. We
I have
also
another topic too.
Oh, you do? Okay. Then really quick, we the Millennium Falcon attached to the Star Destroyer
and turned off his sensors.
Yeah, and then Boba Fett knew.
That was
he
literally
knew, and then he followed him out.
That was actually the first place my brain went when I saw that too. It was like,
so cool.
like because it was an identical scene too. Because in that scene, the Millennium Falcon flies directly over the bridge, and it's scary. And like that's literally what happens. And like they're flying
Right
directly
under.
at the bridge and they go
Yeah.
right under it. So this was a take that I saw on Twitter from a friend of mine, Aaron Larswell, who covers the Lakers, actually works for the Lakers. And his take is that Rosario Dawson is bombing the Ahsoka role because Ahsoka had a certain spunkiness to her in the Clone Wars series.
Yeah.
And this version of Ahsoka is like so playing it cool all the time.
Dude, it's so funny. Elena was picking up on that too.
Oh, really?
She's like, why is Ahsoka just so like boring?
Yeah.
I don't agree. I think she's doing a great job, but like, continue on, please.
So this is my take on it. Like, if you really go back and watch Rebels, she's a lot more muted in that show.
Sure. You're right.
In
You're
Rebels
right. Versus Clone Wars,
they began that transition a while ago. There's no doubt. Like, Clone Wars had a very playful vibe, and Ahsoka as a kid kind of fits into that.
Yeah, like a teenager.
Yeah. In Rebels, like, when they find her, they almost view her as like a godlike figure. What do they call themselves again? Spectre, the team. Fulcrum. Well, no, what do they call their team? Their little team of rebels.
Oh, it is Spectre or something like that.
I think it's
can't remember.
Spectre, but I can't remember.
Other than Phoenix Squadron. Yeah.
Phoenix Squadron, yeah. So basically, they view Ahsoka as like a godlike figure, and like Ahsoka carries herself like that. She carries herself very cool. I'd have to go back and watch Rebels to make sure, but I almost view Ahsoka as Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka as basically the next iteration of Ahsoka becoming more of a grown adult.
We see that occur with Obi-Wan as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but people age and they change, right? Like, okay, like put me next to my 14-year-old self and see how similar we are. It's
put us next to our 24-year-old selves.
You're exactly
when we
right.
met. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Like, we were way, way different then.
Yeah.
I will say, like, there is... I think she's doing a great job at playing Ahsoka. I'm going to say that right off the bat. And I think it totally makes sense for Ahsoka to be more stoic. I will say there is a level of warmth that is lost in this series than what I do know Ahsoka as. Well, and I've been reading or listening to the Ahsoka audiobook. And she does, like, Ahsoka has like this level of warmth, and it's not even like a motherly warmth. It's like a sister warmth.
Yeah.
You know,
like an energy.
An energy. And then like it's infectious. And that infectious warmth is a little bit missed in this series. But like, again, like, I'm okay with it. Like, I think she's doing a really good job. I will say too, I need to backtrack on the trash talk that I was putting on the Ahsoka book. So yes, it is a little bit juvenile. It is way better than I remember it being. And for some reason in my head, it was like all Ahsoka just waiting around for the Empire to win. But that's not really what happened. I think I misinterpreted it when I read it the first time, and listening to it now via audiobook, I'm enjoying it way more.
Well, and it has the voice actress who played Ahsoka, which is cool too.
Yeah, that's true.
The one last thing I'll say on the Ahsoka front is, like, can we give it more than 3 episodes?
True.
Like, she had a couple of cameo appearances in previous shows. Obviously, like, we have this 3-episode sample here in Ahsoka too, but also you got to kind of look at the context. Like, there's kind of ominous news that just been dropped. It's not a very playful environment.
True.
2, like, Sabine is very much the reckless, brash type, and I almost think Ahsoka's trying to rein her in a little bit and try to get her to act more serious.
You're totally right.
And so I think, like, I all I'm saying is like, I don't think it's fair to put that all on Rosario Dawson. Also, like, the writers play a significant role here, and honestly, like, how would these particular episodes, like, really think about these particular episodes and everything that's happened? Do you actually think there's a situation where Ahsoka should have been, like, cracking jokes and having fun and being playful? Like, really
exactly.
Not,
and you can only do that so much because Hu Yang is already doing that with his like directness.
Deadpan,
yeah, he's super deadpan.
Yeah.
I love it. I love every second of it.
Yeah.
But you can only do that so many times in what is like a TV series that has a lot of gravity behind it, right? So to me, it makes sense. It works. I can see where he's coming from. but it works.
Yeah, and again, like I'm gonna go back and look at Rebels, but I like with exception of it being the same voice, because obviously it's the same voice actors, and obviously you guys don't think that plays a role. Of course it does.
Of course it does.
Having a shift in the voice and tone of a character obviously has a certain effect. But like I want to go back and look at Rebels because just some of the key scenes, because like the reality is I literally can't think of a single time in Rebels where Ahsoka was playful.
In Rebels?
Can you?
Yeah, not like right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Whereas that's all she was in Clone Wars.
Yeah, so like when she was a teenager. So like I tend to think that I'm not gonna say it's unfair criticism. I'm just gonna say it's criticism that I disagree with at this point in time.
Yeah. That's a great way to say it.
All right, guys, that is all we have for today. As always, we sincerely appreciate your support. We will be back next Tuesday night or Wednesday to cover episode 4.
Yeah, and thanks for all your comments. We read all of them. We really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks, guys.